Hello, colleagues, and welcome everyone to the third and last day of the Advisory Board meeting. My name is Moa Forstorp. I'm from the Swedish Energy Agency, and I am currently the Vice Chair of the CTCN Advisory Board. And we would like to begin the meeting today by announcing some small adjustments to the agenda. So based on our discussion yesterday about the financial statement, the Secretariat has provided an updated version, and I hope that you have all received it. And the Secretariat, Amanda Lees, will provide an explanation for this update. And with that, we would like to approve it. And we suggest to add an agenda item for today before other matters. So we hope that this is acceptable for colleagues. Otherwise, our agenda stays the same, but we have slightly adjusted the timings to allow for more discussion about the network and the NDE presentations. And we would like to begin the meeting today to recognize that yesterday at the end of the meeting, I missed a raised hand from Omedi. So I would like to see if Omedi wants to make an intervention at the beginning of the meeting today, and also see if other colleagues have additional interventions based on our discussion yesterday or based on what is suggested for the agenda today. So I would like to begin here to open the floor for Omedi and other colleagues to make interventions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moa. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we hear you well.
Yes, unfortunately, my camera may not work well with the kind of internet I have. So thanks for your consideration. I understand yesterday there was a lot of pressure on time, but I wanted to appreciate the presentations very much. 2 points here. The presentation, the CTCN report, and to state that it is a journey that has begun, and I like the structure of the report. I know that in future we shall populate it with the real concrete items under the thematic areas, but for now it suffices for what has been done, and even with the situation as difficult as it is. So one was to appreciate the report. The second one, with regard to the expert position, I wanted to appreciate the goodwill by the government of Japan, which is manifest in the provision of experts to the CTCN. Last time we had the deputy director, Mr. Tomo, who, in my opinion, had a very short period of time with us. I was surprised to learn that he was leaving after that period of time. But all the same, if it was well worked out, and I know as a AB, when he was introduced as a deputy director who will be in charge of resource mobilization, I felt a bit relieved, because the resource mobilization has been a bit of the issues we keep bringing up for the CTCN, and we expected that there should be good results with that position. So the first question I have is whether the effectiveness of the position that was held by Mr. Tomo was reviewed or evaluated after he completed his term, and were there any lessons learned from that? Did we achieve something with the resource mobilization director? That is a question. And there's a new expert coming to fit in his shoes as a resource mobilization director, or what are the new? That was a question that I know was asked yesterday, but I thought we really need somebody in the capacity of a resource mobilizer so that the resources can be mobilized effectively. Then finally, what should be the process of engagement of such experts? That is all I wanted to have clarity on. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Omedi. And I would like to give the floor to Rose to maybe comment on some of your questions. So, Rose, please.
Thank you, Moa, and thank you, Mr. Omedi. I'd like to seek the indulgence of the advisory board to submit this question to our host agency, UNIDO, because we've not been privy to the information, but I'm sure they'll provide it. So we'll be happy to provide that information later. So for the new position and the replacement, we don't have any information right now. The only information we have is what was provided yesterday at the AB. So we'll be happy to follow up and liaise with our host agency and get back to you if that's all right, please.
Thank you very much for that, Rose. And with that, I would like to see if there are any additional comments from colleagues. And I see a raised hand from Orly. Please.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Nice to be back again today. I just wanted to mention something that I know it belonged in yesterday's conversation, but it sort of struck me after looking again at the annual report. And I guess just one comment I wanted to make, it's not major, but maybe it's just something you might consider adding in a sentence or two or something. What struck me is that what doesn't really come out is the real struggle that the CTCN had to deal with, the challenge CTCN had to deal with last year due to COVID. And I feel like when you look at the budget, obviously you see, a far less amount spent on, anything related to engagement because there was no travel, and there were significant challenges, obviously, with getting engagement out there. And obviously the CTCN did a good job overcoming that, or it seems like it did, because there's a lot in here about engagement and knowledge sharing and everything, but it doesn't really come out in the report that you had to do all this in a brand new way, and through mechanisms that you wouldn't have had to do before, like all online, and maybe not seeing your stakeholders face to face, and the program managers not being able to be on the ground with the project delivery partners. So I feel like maybe even just a few sentences up front, just outlining that challenge would actually be a good story to tell for you, that you managed to do all of this despite not being able to do things in the traditional way, and maybe even some, a word or two about a lesson learned about, maybe you discovered that it's possible to do some things, with less travel, or that you might be able to save money in the future, doing things this same way. I don't know, but I think a couple sentences about the challenges that you faced, so the reader, whoever is reading it, understands that all of this wasn't delivered in the way that you would have ever anticipated. So thank you for considering that comment.
Thank you very much, Orly, for that. And I also see in the chat that Anne comments, fully agree with this important point. And also Spencer writes, I endorse the interventions just made by Orly. And I can just join in also endorsing this and saying that it would be really interesting to add such a paragraph or some lessons learned from what Orly just said. And I would like to see maybe if Rose would also like to comment on this.
Yes, I think that's an important point. We have a bit of it mentioned in the JAL, but we'll make sure we bring it forward and really emphasize that, especially the points in relation to lessons learned and how we can use some of those lessons going forward in how we deploy our resources and how we engage with the member states in providing technical assistance. So yes, we'll go back and review it, get some of the information we put in the jar and elaborate it more in the report to reflect that.
Great, thank you very much for that. And I also see in the chat now, also can agree with Orly, and also Sergio writes, endorse interventions by Omedi and by Orly. So thank you very much, colleagues. And at the moment, I see no more raised hands. So with that, I suggest that we turn to our agenda item number 16 for this meeting. It's the second independent review of the CTCN. So as you know, the COP has mandated the UNFCCC Secretariat to commission periodic independent reviews of the effectiveness of the CTCN every 4 years. And in this context, the UNFCCC initiated the second independent review of the CTCN, and the findings of which will be submitted for consideration by COP26 in Glasgow. And I would like to kindly invite Wanna Tanucci-Watana and Bert van der Plas from the UNFCCC Secretariat to provide a summary of where we are in the review process. And we are grateful for the participation of Ernst & Young's consultants working on the CTCN review, who will also provide some high-level preliminary findings. So Wanna and Bert, you have the floor, please.
Okay, good afternoon, good morning. Hello to everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you well. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Moa. And hello to everyone. Thank you very much for inviting us to give a brief update in terms of where we stand with the independent review of the CTCN. What we plan to do is I will give a brief background about the review, the mandate and where we stand, and then I will hand over to the consultants who will share with you some of the preliminary findings which have been identified up to now. So starting maybe with a bit of background, I think you already referred to it, like the Climate Change Secretariat has been mandated to commission independent reviews of the CTCN every 4 years. So every 4 years, an independent review of the CTCN will take place. And the findings of the review, including the recommendations for enhancing the performance of the CTCN, will be considered by the Conference of the Parties, by the COP. And it's very important because based upon the consideration of parties of the findings, they will also decide about the renewal of the MOU between the COP and UNEP regarding the hosting of the CTCN. So that's quite fundamental for the future of the CTCN. So coming back to the first independent review, which took place in 2017, 4 years ago. So based upon the consideration by parties of the report and the deliberations, they indeed agreed to renew the MOU between the COP and UNEP regarding the hosting of the CTCN for another 4 years, meaning that the current contract will expire early next year. So that's important to take note of. And in relation to the first independent review, also they requested the Climate Change Secretariat to commission the second independent review, which we did indeed. And in terms of where we currently stand in response to that request to the Secretariat, we indeed have hired the services of consultants for undertaking the independent review. And they've initiated their work. I think we reported last year already that we had a kickoff meeting in October. And very recently, we received the interim report with some preliminary findings, which they found based upon the extensive research they have been doing in terms of data collection from literature, interviews, and surveys also. And maybe with that background, I would hand over to the consultant from Ernst & Young, Christophe, to share some preliminary findings. I think it's important to stress that these are only preliminary findings because it's still midway the actual data collection stage. So the intention is here to share some preliminary findings which have been identified by the consultants so far. And with that, maybe it's a good moment to hand over to Emmanuel or Christophe to share some of the preliminary findings.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you very well.
Thank you. Thank you, Moa. Thank you, Bert, and thank you all for giving us the opportunity to share these preliminary findings. So Emmanuel, if you can move on to the next slide. Yeah, the next one, please. So the evaluation started, as you say, Bert, in November 2020, and should be finalized by mid-July to give enough time for UNEP to prepare a management response for integration in a global report to be submitted by the end of August. So after a preliminary inception phase, we have collected and processed data to prepare this interim report, and we share today the preliminary findings that are based on the cross-analysis of primary information provided by the different stakeholders, so CTCN director and staff, AB members, donors, network members, NDEs, beneficiaries, and also other regional centers and financing institutions, and also based on secondary information from the review of multiple documents available or provided by CTCN. Our next steps will be to finalize these findings and to prepare the conclusions and recommendations to be shared and discussed with the CTCN. Now I will present to you these preliminary findings that need to be consolidated based on further analysis. So first, if we look at the main successes regarding the effective implementation of the CTCN, what we can say today is the following. So first of all, the different stakeholders have acknowledged the value added of this demand-driven mechanism, which have an institutional legitimacy given by the COP, and that also has a strong sectoral expertise that is agile and responsive, and that is filling a gap by supporting small-size projects and without any real competition with other similar centers. Secondly, continuous improvement of the program of work of the CTCN can be noticed. For example, most of the recommendations from the first independent review were taken into consideration. And the CTCN is also responsive to the guidance given by the COP and the CMA in its decisions. As you previously said, the COVID-19 crisis has been well managed, given the circumstances, since a continuity in terms of services was obtained, and every project was eventually implemented. Also, the CTCN has consequently adapted its services with, for example, dedicated seminars, webinars, on the topic, or by integrating COVID-19 responses into existing technical assistance or capacity building activities. Then, communication and outreach services have also improved since the first independent review. And for example, the knowledge management system content is now considered to be more stable, curated, and accessible. Stakeholders have highlighted an improved collaboration at a strategic level. So first, with the advisory board. through more regular interactions between meetings and the establishment of new communication channels, including subgroups and task force, but also with a stronger emphasis on technical issues rather than on political ones during these meetings. Then, with the financial mechanism, 3 actions have been included in the second program of work of the CTCN and were successfully implemented. For example, we've noticed that events and workshops were organized to increase collaboration between NDEs, NDAs, and focal points. Also, technical assistance funded by the GCF were funded by the GCF readiness and preparatory support. And capacity building from the CTCN was used to train project developers in preparing climate technology related submissions to the GCF. Also, collaboration were improved with the tech through additional joint activities included in their respective program of work and an increased sharing of information between these bodies. The CTCN can be considered as rather cost-effective considering the type of services provided, meaning that the CTCN is providing small-sized and not standardized services because country demand driven. And in other words, we can say that the CTCN is doing well with a rather narrowed staffing and limited budget for services, while fewer internal resources would have implied to even further limit the project scope and expected outputs, or to cancel some of the planned activities, thereby affecting quantity of outputs and quality of outputs or outcomes delivered. The CTCN is recognized as contributing to transformational changes likely to be sustainable through supports to the enabling environment. For example, by providing information and awareness, by enhancing policies and regulatory frameworks, or by contributing to institutional capacity development. The CTCN is expected to provide positive impacts in terms of adaptation and mitigation, but no proper or quantitative estimation was feasible. On one side, because of the nature of the services, and for example, the evaluation of the the 4 GEF-funded regional centers faced the similar issues for evaluating the impact of such services. And we also had to deal with limited information coming from the monitoring and evaluation systems in terms of outputs and outcomes. Finally, the CTCN is also expected to generate socio-economic co-benefits as observed or at least anticipated by stakeholders in terms of economic well-being, gender equality, or human rights. Now, if we look at the main difficulties the CTCN faced to implement its services, we have identified a potential windfall effect with technical assistance activities that would have in most cases occurred anyway, although projects started and are deployed faster thanks to CTCN intervention. Stakeholders also agree with the conclusion that leveraging funding remains a challenge, as observed during the first independent review, and with an expected diversification of funding that did not fully deliver on initial targets. Similarly to the conclusion established by the first independent review, the allocation of resources is perceived as pragmatic, but still difficult because of limited budget, as well as a lack of predictability and a high proportion of earmarked funding. Also, the management structure of the CTCN remain quite complex for an entity of its size, with multiple institutions involved in its management, even if we have noticed that the new project document is expected to clarify the distribution of responsibilities and also to streamline some administrative procedures. Despite the support provided by the CTCN and, for example, the meetings that have been organized, NDEs have still expressed a lack of resources to perform to implement their responsibilities, while limited collaborative work with operational focal points, with NDAs, with network members or private sector was observed. So in some cases, it was due to different strategic views or limited interpersonal knowledge that may partly due to administrative turnover. We also consider that the CTCN is not taking full advantage of the benefits of its extensive network, while synergies among network members have been limited and the engagement of the consortium partners is declining. We mean that the size of the network has been growing significantly in the past years as targeted, but we have observed overall a limited engagement from network members beyond their role as service providers for technical assistance or other activities funded by the CTCN. We've also regret that the new monitoring and evaluation system is still under operationalization, since the baseline data is being collected. Therefore, as I previously said, only limited information on results and impact was available for this independent review. And in the end, last word would be that stakeholders have observed limited effects in terms of direct and concrete technology transfer and market development, as well as limited contribution to partnerships and private sector engagement. So I will stop. I will stop here. I've seen that some hands have raised, and we are happy to provide you with preliminary answers to the preliminary findings. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Emmanuel, and thank you also to Bert. And now I would like to open the floor for AB members and observers to make comments and questions. And I see a raised hand from Spencer. Spencer, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the presenters, both presenters, on this very important aspect of the review. I mean, several of the preliminary results, of course, they are preliminary, and I guess we can interrogate some of them a little bit. But I want to interrogate only one at this point: the complexity of the management structure. And to me, I think this is not really a problem. It should be really used as a benefit. So I just want to hear why will the existing management structure be a difficulty for during the review process. I see that as something that could be beneficial to the CTCN. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Spencer. And I think we can collect a few comments. So Anne, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Chair. I was particularly interested, well, first of all, I want to thank Christophe for his presentation, which is really comprehensive and important for us to look at the value add and the opportunities for improvement of the work of the CTCN. And one question I had was regarding the social co-benefits. If he could just give one example of the social co-benefits that have been mentioned and that are coming out of the assistance provided by the CTCN. And then regarding the financial difficulties or difficulties to leverage finance, if he could elaborate a little bit on what has been expressed by the NDEs or the respondents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. And at the moment, I see no other raised hands, so I may just add one question here from my side also. If you could elaborate a little bit about the methodology and the criteria that you use for the evaluation, and also how you take into account the guidance from COP and CMA into this evaluation. Thank you very much. And over to you, Christophe.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your feedback. For sure, if there are other comments or questions, please send it to us. I don't know, through the secretariat maybe, and we'll be happy to take them into consideration for sure. Maybe to start with your question more. So we've defined evaluative question. So based on our understanding of the CTCN, of the challenges, and the different topics to be evaluated through this review. So on the different aspects, meaning relevance, effectiveness, efficiency, and impact and sustainability. So this evaluative question were defined and validated through the Inception report. So there are, I would say, many of them, and they on the relevance part, they question the, I would say, adequacy of the strategy or program of work of the CTCN with regards to the COP and CMA decision, with also the, I would say, macroeconomic context, including the COVID-19 situation, and also the consistency between the CTCN and other centers of similar initiative and other funding, I would say. Then the effectiveness part is more on the delivery of services to better understand what were the issues and success in terms of delivering the services initially planned. The efficiency question look at the different components of the CTCN, meaning the AB, the advisory board, the network, the link with the consortium partners, and other aspects. And while the impact section focuses on different type of impacts, so both environmental and socioeconomic impacts of the CTCN. So we try to have a quite comprehensive evaluation grid. And based on this question, we've defined data collection and analysis tools to collect and process data to have information for answering this question. So we look at the in detail at the for example, the COP and CMA decisions to understand how the CTCN has taken into consideration this guidance and how it was translated in the program of work, for example, of the CTCN or the operational plans. Maybe on the second question, and I am going back on the social co-benefits, it was information given by mostly by beneficiaries, either through the NDE survey that was implemented by CTCN last year, and confirmed also by another survey that we've we have implemented during the review towards beneficiaries, but also the NDEs and network members. And when we look at the different type of impacts, we found that on this specific impact, there was I would say, more an agreement, satisfaction from the respondent on this type of impact compared to others, meaning that it's more a perception from stakeholders rather than I would say a precise evaluation on one or two specific projects. And maybe to first question was about the management structure. On what we say is that it's more the internal, management structure, and the I would say more on the administrative part, I would say, of the CTCN, that might be in some cases quite a bit complex, but it's being streamlined. And what you noticed, Spencer, and maybe we should more highlight it in the evaluation, is that having both, for example, UNIDO and UNEP involved in the implementation of the CTCN is also an advantage because of the network and expertise and resources that can be provided by this organization, and that can support the implementation of the CTCN. So you're right that it's not only negative, there are also positive part of this specific organization, for sure.
Thank you very much for that, Christophe. And now there are many comments here in the chat, I see, and we have a question, Matt, and then Sergio, and then Orly would like to raise questions. And then we also have some comments here, additional comments from Anne about which kind of difficulties were mentioned regarding leveraging finance, and also Spencer, why sustainability of the CTCN was not among the criteria used. So I would like to give the floor to Matt first, and then Sergio, and then Orly, and then I would suggest that we, unless there are other comments, that we give Christophe and Bert a last chance to comment, and then that we move on in the agenda, if that's acceptable for everyone. So Matt, please.
Thank you, Chair. Christophe, thank you very much for your presentation also. I have just a simple-ish question to ask. And I do recognize that there was an evaluation also in 2017. But if you consider the fact that the functions were assigned as a COP agreement many years ago, and since then, especially since Paris, with the introduction also of the technology framework, more demands, let's say, have been placed on the CTCN, and you could argue that its remit has increased. And then even we heard yesterday from the Green Climate Fund in terms of their strategy, they're looking for more collaboration with the tech mechanism. So how have you considered that growth of service or function or remit in terms of your evaluation versus what was originally assigned or ascribed to the CTCN when it was first established? Thanks.
Thank you very much. And then I will give the word to Sergio and then to Orly. Please, so Sergio.
Yes, I would also to thank Christophe for his presentation. I just wrote down my question in the chat just to be more clear. as I noticed that in the preliminary outcomes of the independent review, I noticed that the involvement of network members is limited. As this is an issue that we faced in a AB task force meeting, and we tried to tackle this issue. My question to Christoph is if Ernst & Young had some interviews specifically with network members, and if they gathered impressions from them.
Very much, and then we have Orly.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for that very informative presentation. Really good to see some of the preliminary impressions. I have a question on, there is a line in the difficulty slide on limited impacts in terms of direct concrete tech transfer and market development benefits. And I imagine some of that, a lot of that is related to the type of service that the CTCN provides, as we've spoken about many times, very early on in the cycle. And that's also part of the reason why the M&E framework has been a challenge to develop. I'm wondering, despite the limited concrete impacts on that part, the tech transfer itself and the market development, have you seen or did you look for any evidence of impact on creating the enabling environment for those parts of the cycle to happen? So in terms of, how the CTCN, did it manage to build the foundations for tech transfer and market development to happen later on, even though you wouldn't be able to comment if the tech transfer actually did happen? So thank you.
Orly, and now I see also a hand from Spencer. So would you like to make one more intervention, Spencer, or was it an old hand?
Sorry, that was an old hand, but I just wanted to also respond to the criteria used. I noticed that they use the appropriate criteria, but the sustainability of this of the CTCN to me is a critical and one of the most critical criteria. So could we have some responses on this issue?
Thank you very much for that. And then I suggest that we give the word to Christoph, and then that we can conclude on this agenda item. So Christoph, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thanks very much. So I think I will not have today all the answers, especially on some of the points you raised, and especially on the impacts. I think what we've gathered today on the impacts were preliminary findings, and we've also discussed this matter with Bert, for example, from UNFCCC, to try to reinforce the section of this report of the independent review, which is mostly based on perception from stakeholders. So, for example, on the enabling environment to facilitate technology transfer, I think that's something we can look for in the information and the documentation we have, either provided by CTCN or on the type of project, to look if we can, at least to investigate more this issue, for which so far I honestly don't have the right or exact answer. So that's, I think, something we look at. On maybe the sustainability part, we look more at the sustainability of a project, meaning that would the intervention and project finance by the CTCN be sustained over time. So we have preliminary information, especially on the enabling environment side of the activities that may sustain, but so far that's the only information I can share with you, and we'll look for more evidence on this aspect. We've noticed that. On the on the functions, more on questioning the current function of the CTCN and the growth of services. I think that's something that was highlighted in many during many interviews or even surveys, explaining that there were more and more services or more and more demand for the CTCN with still limited budget. So that's a real question, and that's something we will provide clearer answer in the evaluation. And on the last question, on the last aspect, so network members were surveyed, meaning that we got, I don't have the number, but more than 50 respondents to the survey from network members, I would say. I just have to check. No, more than 100 network members and partners, because the survey was addressed to network members and consortium partners. So we've gathered information from them through this tool. So yeah, I think that's all I can say on my side today. But we've noted the different issues you raised, and we try to provide answers in the final version of the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Christophe, and thank you again for your presentation and for these comprehensive answers. And there was also an additional comment here in the chat from Anne. Maybe you would like to address it in the chat. And we are looking forward to reading your final report. So with that, I suggest to close this agenda item and hand over to Ping for the next agenda item. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Moa. We have very good discussion today. And now we turn to our next agenda item, the outcomes of the AB task force meetings. Earlier this year, AB members met in several task force meetings. One is focusing on resource mobilization efforts to support the activities and operations of the CTCN. Another task force was also held to discuss the knowledge piece that were prepared by the CTCN Secretary with the support of Mr. Matthew Kennedy from the Ringgold constituency. The knowledge piece seeks to provide guidance for countries to build more climate resilient economies post-COVID-19. As follow-up of these discussions, I would like to invite the Secretary to provide an update on progress made since. So the Secretary,
yes,
please provide the update.
Thank you, Ping. Just waiting for the presentation to come up. Yes, there it is. Yes, so yeah, my name is Clarine Ovando, and I recently joined the CTCN as the Donor and Policy Specialist. So the purpose of this presentation today is to provide you with an update on the progress made on the two topics discussed during our AB task force meetings in February and March. So, looking first at resource mobilization efforts, the advisory board during its March task force meeting recommended that the CTCN continue to make progress with the preparations of a donor roundtable, and I think we've heard some bits about that earlier yesterday. Articulate its value proposition, so to elaborate on the idea that the CTCN is in a unique role and clearly demonstrating the need that the CTCN is trying to meet, and by doing so to facilitate fundraising efforts. In an attempt to assess future financing needs and to somewhat justify additional financing, the board recommended that the CTCN prepare different resource mobilization scenarios, linked to different outputs, such as the number of TAs implemented. So for example, a baseline scenario with the rate of implementation remaining as it currently is, an increased funding scenario reflecting the surge in interest among developing countries, and then sort of a thinking big type of scenario. So with that, and before diving in and sharing some of the progress made, I wanted to briefly provide some context as we move forward to give you an idea of where we're coming from and in terms of budgeting, implementation rate, and funding commitments. So this graph shows just sort of how we fared compared to the objectives we've set for ourselves on a yearly basis. So the budget here forms the basis of our annual operating plan, which sets out the targets and the objective we set ourselves for the year. Of course, the budget we set ourselves for every year is also based on how much funding we have available at that time and how much we know we can expect in the year to come. So in that sense, we need to have some sort of forward visibility in order to plan accordingly. So as you can see in the past years, the CTCN's expenditures were below the budget set. And this can be attributed to a number of factors, including the fact that the CTCN hasn't been around for that long, and the time it needs to sort of to start going, and also the setting of perhaps at the beginning some somewhat unrealistic targets for TA implementation, which perhaps didn't take into account the lead time that was needed to establish a strong pipeline of TA requests. In 2020, we can see that the balance of expenditure against the budget was leveled, and we believe that this is linked to perhaps on the one end more realistic budget setting, and based on more robust monitoring of project implementation and budgets with regular work plan meetings. So in 2020, the CTCN ended up spending more than budgeted for on TAs and less on outreach, networking, stakeholder engagement, and CTCN operations, as Orly pointed out earlier. And of course, this is attributed to the COVID-19 pandemic and the travel restrictions. So now sort of moving away from our annual budget and expenditures and looking at the yearly contributions or the new contributions we receive on a yearly basis and expect to receive in the coming years. This is what we're looking at. We can see that the funding received in 2020 increased significantly, with over 4 million received from the GCF in 2020. I can see that there's some, my graph there is not showing properly. Apologies for that. But I think you can still sort of get the idea there. We've also counted in 2020 funding that we received from the Danish government and the Republic of Austria, which arrived in our accounts in late 2020, but obviously cover activities that are implemented in 2021. So that shows quite a high amount there in 2020. So we have about 8 million in new contributions secured in 2021. And that does not count any sort of carryover that we would take on from 2020, which amounts to approximately 10 million carried over, so from previous years. In addition, we have funding from the Adaptation Fund that will be spent between 2021 and 2025. So we're quite secure in terms of sort of the new cash inflow that's anticipated for this year, for 2021, thanks to funding that has been carried over, and I have highlighted there, this is, funds that are carried over from our multi-donor trust fund, as well as earmarked funds that are valid for several years. Yes, so we can also see that the outlook for 2020 at this time is almost at 2.5 million, and this obviously does not include any carryovers that would come from 2021. And this we will only sort of have a better idea of towards the end of this year. So I think what this can show, and speaking to the question raised yesterday on increasing ambition, so we're almost halfway through 2021, and we'll soon start our budgeting process for 2022. So as the situation currently looks, it would be hard, I think, for the CTCN to plan for an operating budget, that goes much over 10 million, because there is not much visibility in terms of potential or incoming voluntary contributions, and especially contributions coming into our multi-donor trust fund that allow us great flexibility. So yes, from the financial report presentation yesterday, we know that technical assistance activities constitutes the bulk of CTCN operations. In fact, we heard yesterday that 72% of our expenditures in 2020 were for technical assistance. So with that in mind, we can see that the number of requests for technical assistance is growing. And this growth is driven by a number of things. On the one hand, we have an increased portfolio of successful GCF readiness proposals. We heard that, about 4 million or over that amount in 2020. We also know sort of the regionalization of the CTCN services. So some of you might recall in the initial structure of the CTCN that services were rendered through managers responsible for each service area. So for example, an NDE would have to interact with CTCN's capacity building manager, CTCN's technical assistance manager for mitigation, and then another one for adaptation. So, that was multiple stakeholders to interact with for one NDE. And all this has been, redesigned, and we now have regional managers who are also based directly in the regions, and in this case in Nairobi, in Bangkok, and in Mexico City. And, these regional managers are responsible for all of the CTCN service areas. I think this proximity to countries and availabilities, they are sort of there on a phone call, really allows for greater engagement of stakeholders with more relevant and targeted services provided. And it establishes closer ties with country climate technology stakeholders. And we think that this is in part sort of also led to TA requests coming in. I think the growth in requests is also led to proactive engagement with the financial mechanism. We've seen this, and we touched upon this yesterday on the Adaptation Fund Climate Innovation Accelerator, where really efforts are being made to generate new targeted adaptation requests for technical assistance. So yesterday we shared with you that the CTCN has been working on implementing 109 technical assistances in 2020, and these include 48 new TAs that were started in 2020. So 109 TAs, that is a lot, and not all were completed last year. There are different stages of implementation, and many will be carried over to the following year, because you will remember that it takes between 12 to 18 months to implement a TA. So with this information, one of the key messages perhaps is that it takes a lot of engagement and capacity building to build a strong pipeline of viable technical assistance requests that make sense for the country and that build on its national commitments. So I think talking to the point, Orly, you made earlier on, last year we really thrived on a very strong pipeline of requests that came from multiple stakeholder engagements, in-person meetings and in-person engagements and capacity building activities that were held with countries, pre-COVID times. So this will also be something sort of interesting to monitor for the year to come. So for the moment, I want to highlight that it's not that we're turning down TA requests because of a lack of resources necessarily, and this will vary obviously by regions, but it's that we're using a lot of our resources not only to implement the TA requests we receive, but also importantly to provide capacity building services and one-on-one engagement to build a strong TA request that makes sense. So if we are sure that we can sort of count on raised amounts of funding in the coming years, let's say that the next 5 years, then of course we can build this pipeline of requests, and we know what the needs are. We have indication that what the needs are and that they're there, but we can see that countries are struggling to perhaps articulate those into requests, and we can help articulate them through capacity building and engagement, and this requires resources, including for human resources. So with all that sort of context shared, I'd like to share some recent resource mobilization efforts and some ongoing initiatives. So as we've had the opportunity to share with you, we received new contributions in 2020 from the government of Denmark, Japan, and the Republic of Austria, and non-earmarked funding as well from the government of Sweden and most recently from the UK. We really tried to engage more closely and consistently with multilateral development banks, and this will hopefully be a longer-term collaboration. So we've engaged with the Islamic Development Bank and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development recently, sort of initially exchanging project pipelines to see where synergies and collaboration could be sought. We're also collaborating with the West African Development Bank to explore a larger scale GCF full proposal opportunity. Oh, sorry about that. So, as has been shared, we've strengthened our engagement with the financial mechanism, and we intend to continue doing so. As was described in the 2020 Joint Tech CTCN annual report to the COP, we have sought to formalize or articulate our pro bono approach, and we'll really be looking at continuing that approach, which we have nurtured with the government of Korea thus far. We're doing a lot of work on trying to connect with other organizations working in the same space to build on each other's strengths, exchange information, and deliver greater value together. For example, we've been exchanging recently with UNDP, given its large field presence, to see how complementarities could be sought at different levels. Now, my technical colleagues obviously will be able to speak more to this point, but we're also deepening our work in partnership with the private sector, with SMEs and innovation-focused entities. And finally, I'd say we're acutely aware that attentive monitoring, evaluation, and reporting of our programming is vital, and we have been giving this area a lot of attention and will continue to be doing so in the coming year. In our task force discussion in March, we touched upon the question of whether the CTCN's current implementation modality is fit for purpose. If we look at our current model, so interested climate technology stakeholders at the country level, they would submit, together with the NDE, a TA request to the CTCN worth a maximum of $250,000. The CTCN then collaborates with the NDE and the interested parties to develop a tailored technical assistance response plan. And through a competitive bidding process, a CTCN network member with the right skill sets and expertise is then identified to implement the TA. So this would constitute the process for the majority of CTCN's TAs. The CTCN has recently been exploring a complementary model, if you'd like, which seeks to respond to several objectives, including, on the one hand, trying to identify new sources of funding that complement voluntary contributions, and while at the same time responding to country needs. And as we mentioned yesterday, also raising the level of ambition by really supporting countries to upscale climate technology solutions. So, for example, the CTCN could identify calls for proposals or funding opportunities for larger technical assistance opportunities, like the GCF full proposal or the recent NAMA facility opportunity. And based on the focus of this programmatic funding, and the CTCN's prior knowledge and experience of what countries are exploring in terms of climate technology solutions, the CTCN would work together with NDE, country stakeholders and network members to develop either country, regional, or global funding proposals. So I think this approach would remain country-driven, of course, and it's a type of service that can be offered to countries. It would allow us to support countries to scale up the results of smaller TAs that we've supported into full-scale multi-million or multi-year projects. Of course, the CTCN would need to dedicate resources to work on such larger projects, and there are a number of project preparation facilities that would enable this work as well. I think over the past couple of years, we've also shared with you that the CTCN has worked on a growing number of multi-country and programmatic requests involving several countries. So, these broad thematic groupings could also, represent an interesting opportunities for access to larger funding opportunities. So we touched upon this on our task force meeting, and our initial reflections on articulating our value proposition are the following, and this is really a summary. I'd be happy to share some more detailed thoughts. So the CTCN is the leading UN body for climate change and technology implementation. The CTCN is the designated body under the UNFCCC, responsible for technology implementation. The CTCN is demand-driven, and we've touched upon this earlier. The CTCN offers tailored technology assistance. Our regional staff provide one-on-one support to NDEs. Customized responses are developed, and experts with the right skills are mobilized. The CTCN staff guide technology assistance throughout the process to provide targeted interventions that overcome obstacles and really help move countries forward. The CTCN creates economic opportunities by mobilizing businesses, civil society, and research institutes, amongst others, through its global network and really fostering endogenous climate technology innovation and entrepreneurship, thereby creating new markets and job opportunities. The CTCN supports the full technology cycle and a complete spectrum of mitigation and adaptation technologies. So, as you know, the CTCN delivers technical assistance, capacity building, and knowledge sharing activities for a full range of technology priorities, anywhere from needs assessments and innovation to identifying financing sources for upscaling. And finally, the CTCN places focus on gender and youth through gender mainstreaming and youth inclusion in its technology work. I think we've also tried here to highlight the fact that the CTCN really serves as a climate action accelerator, so helping countries get to the next level, to build their ambition, to identify their technology needs, and to enable transformational change. And I think we've really managed to start this process with a few millions thus far. So we really seek to help countries find potential solutions to issues, be it technology solutions, financial solutions, or finding the right expertise, and to support the transfer transfer and deployment of technologies. I think in our donor in our resource mobilization task force meeting, we had touched upon the organization of a donor roundtable, and I wanted here to provide you with some updates on progress made. So through our chairs, Ping and Moa, we have sent a letter to Inger Andersen, the executive director of UNEP. They're soliciting the leadership of UNEP and UNFCCC to host a donor roundtable in collaboration with donor governments, and we have heard sort of from the UK the interest to also lead that together with Denmark as the host of the CTCN. The purpose would be, of this donor roundtable would be to bring together diverse stakeholders to encourage sustained funding and sort of a greater pipeline of funding for CTCN activities in the years to come. And we have also extended the invitation to Inger Andersen to address the AB meeting in September. In terms of sort of the next steps, we will, of course, continue to advance with the organization of the donor roundtable. We hope to secure a meeting with UNEP's executive director and her team in the weeks or months to come. And we'll keep you updated on and involved as we go along. We are also exploring the possibility of including in our work plan a few deep dive analysis as was suggested. And as part of the preparations for the third program of work, we will work on forecasting and scenario planning, also as suggested. So here I'm going to switch to the second area of discussion. We held another task force meeting in February, led by our AB member Matthew Kennedy, who's been working with us on this. And when we met, we discussed the guidance document that was prepared to guide countries really to deal with the impact of the pandemic as they continue their low carbon pathways and to consider investing in and implementing climate resilience actions. I think here, sort of the summary of the recommended action points from that meeting was to integrate the comments that advisory board members had shared. Another action that was suggested was to sort of provide more information on how the CTCN will disseminate the guidance, and to engage with partners. So, what have we done since? We have effectively managed to gather all the comments received and to launch, or at least to finalize the publication. We intend to launch this publication during a side event during the subsidiary body virtual meetings in June. The guidance material is on our website now, and it will also be integrated into our planned stakeholder engagement activities, sort of including the Regional Climate Week. So, any opportunity to sort of integrate that in our own ongoing work. And finally, we are also planning a series of webinars which will take place likely in Q3 of this year. And these will be organized in each region to discuss really country-led actions and measures that are in line with this guidance document, and will also hopefully help drive quality TA requests that look at the broad scope of green recovery actions across sectors. The intended audience for these webinars are, of course, NDEs and climate technology stakeholders at the country and regional level. And yes, that brings me to the end of my presentation, and happy to take on any questions.
Thank you, Clarine. Thank you for very clear and informative update of the task force. And I already see several raise the hand, and I think first one I will take from the chatting room. Sergio asked when the presentation will be available on the website. And I see two raise the hand from Spencer and Shiv. So Spencer, you first, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Clarine, for this very, very clear and very important presentation. I have to go back to the famous topic. We see the growth in the demand for CTCN services. At the same time, the budget is plateaued at 10. So it's kind of uncharitable statement here, but that might be a self-fulfilling situation and might be sending the wrong signals. I think we need to send the appropriate signals. The situation could be that when we achieve the budget, it is not an achievement. And I think we cannot get ourselves into that achieving a budget which is not achieved, which is not an achievement, because we have a lot of unmet demand and so on. So we have to be very careful in our processes here. I think the model was that we should get resources from a variety of sources. But I think we might be seeing a reduction in the public source. And maybe instead of a complementary action of other resources, we see a substitution. So again, we need to maybe have to look at this. The resource mobilization strategy seems to be on point, but it seems to me that the public resources might be dwindling, if I get it right, are being substituted for other resources. With 4 million from the GCF, of course, this is basically 40% of our budget here. So if I understand it well, so maybe if I could get a good explanation here, what is the trend that we're seeing for public funds to the CTCN, and how do we be innovative so that we can have a more responsive and more active budgeting process to be a little bit more ambitious, as I indicated yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you, Spencer. Shiv, I think we'll take your question, and then we'll ask the secretary to provide some more explanation and clarifications. Shiv, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Ping, and good day, everyone. Yeah, I'd just be interested. I have a couple of questions, actually. I'd be interested in hearing more about the donor roundtable. What exactly is being planned, and at what level of participation is being expected? Would it be a minister level or office director. Just kind of curious. That'd be helpful for my internal planning purposes. I'd also be interested in learning more about the private sector engagement, specifically what companies are we targeting? And on that, I would really urge the secretary to use AB members to make these connections to the private sector, at least from the US side with the Leader Summit last week. We've seen renewed engagement of many Fortune 500 companies that want to coordinate better with the USG on climate. And I would, absolutely be happy to make those connections where needed or identified. And I'm sure this isn't unique to the US situation. I'm sure there are other AB members and colleagues out there who'd be helpful to make those private sector connections. So I would just really urge the CTCN secretary to use AB members to their advantage. And then one final comment, just to follow up on what Spencer said. I think he makes a great point. And I think it's not enough to just achieve what a budget allows. It would be really great to know what we are missing and what are the opportunities for increased engagement with additional funds. I'll leave it there. Really helpful presentation, and really happy to see all the progress that the Secretariat's making, both in this presentation, but also in the independent review that our colleagues from Ernst & Young provided. I think it really shows the strength of the Secretariat and shows how great of a job Rose is doing. So lots of appreciation from my end on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Shiv, for the comments. And I will give the floor to the Secretary to provide some feedback.
Thank you, Ping. I'll try to take as many as I can. Sergio, to your first question around presentations, when will they be on the website? I assume it's the presentations from the AB meeting, and those will be made available, if not tonight, by tomorrow, certainly. To the question on sort of the growth and demand for CTCN services and the diversity of funding sources, are we looking at a substitute to voluntary contributions? I mean, I'd say, on the one hand, we're really sort of following our mandate, and that is very much led by member states and by the voluntary contributions that have been decided there. So we are, following that mandate. But what I will say, and what I think sort of maybe could help here, is that what we're suffering the most from, if you'd like, is the lack of predictability of funding and the flexibility of funding. So a lot of our resources are earmarked to specific types of activities or sectors or geographic areas, and are not necessarily multi-year. So that really restricts us on a yearly basis. And were we able to have a greater idea of what to expect in 2022, 2023, I think that would also help to increase this ambition. It's quite risky to go ahead and plan for a high budget when we don't have that visibility on the long term yet. But I think it's important to keep in mind that we're also working towards developing the third program of work. And there will be fundraising efforts on that program of work, and I think that will be more multi-year, hopefully more into the multi-donor trust fund. We will emphasize sort of flexibility and the need for non-earmarked funding. Shiv, to answer your question on the donor roundtable, I appreciate that there is a desire for more detailed information, especially that this is scheduled for this year, hopefully. And I think we really listened to the advice that we've gotten from the advisory board to also sort of push or use our host agencies to lead on this as well. And so I think the first step and where we'll be able to give you more information perhaps is once we've had that initial meeting with the executive director of UNEP and their team to see also kind of what their thoughts are for the CTCN as well. So I'd be happy to really circulate more detailed information at that point, and I've taken note of what level of participation would be requested and whatnot. I'll leave it to Rose for perhaps also on the private sector.
Yeah, just to add on the donor roundtable, so one of the reasons we would like to meet with the Executive Director of UNEP is really to leverage the institutional ability to convene member states and working with the UNFCCC as the two institutions in agreement to host the CTCN. And so also to get a direction for UNEP Corporate Services and the team there that is responsible for resource mobilization to work with us to organize something substantive, especially since the multi-donor trust fund for CTCN is in there. So we are definitely following up on this. We do have the support of UNEP internally. There's work being done to move that process forward. We'll be able to provide feedback. So part of that would be working with the resource mobilization guidance, the team in UNEP to guide us on the level of participation and how to arrange it and all that. So for now, that is something we would be happy to provide you, updates on quickly because we understand the importance of this. On the private sector, this is something we are really keen to receive support on from the advisory board members, and we really thank you for offering that because we've been tracking some of the large foundations and donors, and it would definitely help to have member states introduce us or even heads of UN agencies. I know, Shiv, if it wasn't for the COVID-19 pandemic, there had also been support from you and the US government to support a mission to some of these foundations in the US to introduce us on the work we do as part of the resource mobilization. But we know it's the same thing here in Europe largely. So this is something we'd really be very grateful to receive the support of the advisory board for. We are up to the task of putting together the documentation and the value proposition that we could make under your guidance that would make sense to the private sector. So this is something we'd really be happy to move forward with the support of the advisory board. I think it would make a very big difference.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Clarine. And I see more raised hand. I see raised hand from Merapi. Merapi, please, you have the floor.
Yeah. Good morning. I would like to make a comment vis-a-vis the Spencer's comment that there is a substitution of public money with other sources. I don't have the figures for the Green Climate Fund, but I'm sure that the funds coming, mostly the funds of Green Climate Fund, comes for the private, for the public sector, with a major collective contribution from the EU member states. Thank you.
Thank you, Merapi, for pointing that out. And we are behind our schedule for almost 30 minutes. So if you have a question, I think this will be the last questions we'll gather for this session, for this agenda item. We also can take some questions from the observers, both AB members and observers. So before I see any other raised hand, I myself have one question regarding the complementary approach proposed just by Clarine in the presentation regarding the TA over 250,000 US dollars. I do see the necessity as we are using the original approach, multi-country requests. So some of the project will be larger in size. So if we gonna try this complementary approach, what kind of process will be used? Will that be the same as the current practice, or is there any other suggested like additions, like some involvement of the advisory board members, etc.? We don't.
Thank you, Ping. For some of the complementary models for service delivery, we would need the engagement of the advisory board in terms of agreeing to change some of the modalities for delivery. So if I give an example, if we support a country to leverage, let's say, a GC of technical support from $250,000 to $10 million, as we did in Laos, it's a single country grant. We can no longer, procure it through CTCN, and that's why we handed it over to the country. Or if we run a joint multi-country program, say with a consortium partner or network member, and we receive $10 million to support 10 countries, we may have to do sometimes direct implementation because we will now essentially be running a program. So we would like to present these models a little bit more to you and to seek your guidance in terms of now presenting, allowing us to use different delivery mechanisms, including the one we have. So, but these are preliminary thoughts we have based on some of the ideas we see from our experience, and would like in the future to be able to present to you in more concrete terms what the different options would mean, and then to seek the approval of the advisory board before we move forward with that. But we anticipate that we will definitely need the approval of the advisory board to make additional allowances on how we can deliver technical support before we move forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Rose. It's very clear. And I see no raised hands or questions in the chatting room. Let's move to our next agenda item. I see Cassie. Cassie, you are the last one. You are the last. Thank you. Please, Cassie, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Chair, for the floor. And we would just like to welcome the strong support of the EU and Japan and other parties for resource mobilization as public funding, and also we think that private funding, although necessary, should not be seen as a replacement to the mobilization of public funding, which needs to be stronger. And also, we just want to highlight again, make sure again that we will be making an intervention under agenda item 20. So yeah, thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, Cassie. Thank you for sharing your comments. And also, I will assure you, we will have your representative deliver some remarks in the under other matters agenda item. So due to time constraints, we will cut the break time, and then we go to our next agenda item, the implementation of the M&E framework. Ma, please.
Thank you very much, Ping. And now we would like to move to the agenda item number 18. So as you know, in response to a mandate from COP23 and guidance contained in the technology framework, the TEC and CTCN worked together to develop a new system for monitoring and evaluation of the impacts of activities under the technology framework. To monitor the long-term impacts leveraged from the results of the Technology Assistance Project, the CTCN, together with the TEC, developed a biannual survey for NDEs to gather ex-post impacts of CTCN technical assistance. And I would like to invite the CTCN Secretariat to provide a summary of the findings from this first NDE biannual survey. So Karina, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Moa. So we would like to share with you, as Moa was saying, one portion of our M&E work with you today. And indeed, last year was the first year that we fully operationalized our new M&E framework, which we had done jointly with the TEC. And we also, in consideration of the outcomes of the first independent review of the CTCN, which took place in 2017, which really supported the idea of enhancing CTCN reporting on impact. We worked together with the tech to look at some additional measures that we could take to support this process. So during last year, we conducted an Nda Nde survey, which we developed jointly. And the main points or the main goals of this work were to gather information on adaptation and mitigation results, as well as impacts following the completion of CTCN technical assistance implementation. And some of the results that we'd like to share with you today complement the impacts that we measure through our M&E system. So I will go over a few of the findings. These are not the complete list of findings, but some of the major ones that we wanted to share with you. So first of all, we asked NDEs who had completed technical assistance collaboration with the CTCN to let us know if there were any results or recommendations from the technical assistance that had been taken up in the country since its completion. And what we mean by this is looking at the work being mainstreamed into broader planning and policy frameworks, or adoption of different types of policies or schemes. And indeed, we found that 74% of respondents indicated affirmatively that they had taken up the results of the technical assistance. And here you can see just a few examples of this work. In Antigua and Barbuda, for example, the workforce development strategy for priority energy sector work that we had done resulted that the information was taken up into a NAP, into the NAP process. And in other cases, such as Mauritius, we found that the results of the technical assistance guidance were fully integrated into the port master plan there as part of the technical assistance, or following the technical assistance. Next, we asked if there was additional funding and investment that had come as a result of the technical assistance. And here the answer was 48% that answered affirmatively. And we have a few examples that we show here. And in Armenia, for example, the work that we did on a technical assistance to identify technologies for climate change mitigation and adaptation resulted in the funding after the TA in the amount of $3 million and co-financing additionally for $2.5 million. And then others that you can see here include, for example, in Laos, where the technical assistance was able to be leveraged then into a $10 million proposal for the GCF. Then we asked how likely the impacts of the TA would be sustained over time. And here, 78% of those NDEs responding regarding the TA said that they believed that it is being sustained. And so, for example, in Vietnam, we did a technical assistance on the cost-benefit assessment of mitigation options in rice production. And this ended up developing user tools that can empower the decision-making and investing in adopting the low-carbon rice production options. And in Brazil, or actually one I would like to mention is in Pakistan, a national certification scheme that was developed for energy auditors and managers has really established a full mechanism that generates certified workforce to implement energy efficiency in the industry. And what was reported was that this will lead to energy savings, GHG emission reductions of 1.9 million tons of CO2 reduction on an annual basis for 3 years and beyond, with a water savings of 3.25 million cubic meters on an annual basis, and the addition of greater job generation. And then we wanted to see to what extent the technical assistance contributed positively to enabling environments for climate technology transfer, dissemination, and upscaling. And here we had a response of 64%. And you can see that we have provided some examples here for the for TAs that were completed. And among these, for example, in Tonga, where we drafted and adopted, the energy efficiency master plan, this has been adopted. and will enable several low carbon interventions through a number of sectors that had been identified during the technical assistance implementation. So as this was the first time that the TEC and CTCN had jointly worked on such a survey, we have also been taking some time to try to learn from the process. And we felt that the survey was indeed quite useful. First and foremost, as a means to track the outcomes and the impact from completed technical assistance, and to learn from that past experience about challenges or ways that could be either improved or repeated in the future, and to identify potential opportunities for replication or scale up of the original TAs, or that they could be replicated in other settings. And it also helps us to identify particular cases where we believe it would be helpful to do a deeper dive or a more in-depth analysis into that particular TA, so that we can provide a more comprehensive review for the public and for donors, for our advisory board members, and so forth. And one of the additional advantages that we found is, really to highlight some of the challenges that we might see, especially if they might be systemic challenges. But some of the examples that we did see coming from this NDE survey was that, for example, after providing some assistance in Lesotho, there was, from the participants, we had a satisfactory response in terms of the training for trainers and NDEs. However, following this, they faced challenges to leverage additional funds for transferring the skills and knowledge. And in addition, we found that several countries, including Bangladesh and Palestine, raised the issue of the challenge that the pandemic had created in terms of fully implementing, fully taking advantage of the outcomes of the technical assistance. So we hope that we can integrate some of these findings in designing future TAs, and also to dig a little deeper in some of these cases to understand the limitations or challenges, but also things that proved helpful to different countries. And then we also have been taking a look at how useful was this method of doing a survey among NDEs in terms of collecting post-impact data. And we found that it is a very useful tool. We want to reach out, and especially to find out about what has happened after we've completed the implementation. And there is really a need for a robust post-TA monitoring process because traditionally we've done that more on an ad hoc basis. And though we may not have the resources to do an in-depth analysis of each and every TA after the fact, that we feel like we can still get a lot of learning from this type of process. And we feel that the surveys, the outcomes of the survey were sometimes lacking in a little bit more qualitative information that we would like to have received about the challenges and limitations that the NDEs perceived. So we've gathered some reflections for future data. We've considered, first of all, is doing this every other year the right length of time to capture the impacts, because we also don't want to overburden NDEs, but we want the information to be still fresh in their memory. And how can we best support NDEs to monitor whether the impacts have been realized? So these are some of the things that we are considering together with the TEC. And I wanted just to briefly mention also, because we had touched upon some of the other findings in the report during the earlier discussion on the independent review. And so I just wanted to just briefly highlight these. So for example, 70% of the respondents in the survey had indicated that technical assistance had positively influenced the advancement of gender equality and human rights in the medium term. And likewise, 93% of the respondents indicated that the technical assistance had positively influenced the economic and social well-being of the population in the medium term. So we have made the full report available on the Advisory Board 17 meeting page, and I encourage you to to look at that for more detail in terms of the responses of the individual NDEs, if you're interested in seeing some of the other findings from that report. And otherwise, we're happy to take any questions or comments that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Karina. Very interesting to hear these updates on the results from this survey. And I would here like to open the floor for questions and comments from AB members or from observers. And just to begin, maybe I will ask a question. You mentioned the updated M&E framework. So how does this survey relate to the updated M&E framework? If you could say a few words about that. And also, prior to this meeting, you circulated this report on transformational impact assessment, but then we decided to discuss it at a later point because we had so many agenda items. But if you could also just mention a few words about this report. Thank you. And now I'm looking in the chat and seeing if there are some raised hands. But maybe, Karina, you would like to begin by addressing those.
Sure, thank you, Moa. So as we had been updating our combined M&E system with the tech, we realized that as part of this, we need to have a better understanding of what are some of the outcomes of our work, sometimes after they leave our involvement in them. And so we had multiple discussions with the tech about what types of information would be useful for both of our sides in terms of some of the knowledge products that they produce and other work. And we felt that it would be best to jointly produce this survey. So we did develop the survey together, and we thought on a preliminary basis that we might time it for an every other year frequency. And we hope that this will provide sort of a supplemental information to our monitoring and evaluation system, but it does, a lot of the questions that are contained in the survey are directly related to the impact data that we gather through our M&E system. So they're very much aligned in that sense. And then you mentioned the transformational impact assessment, and indeed we had worked together with UNFCCC, our consortium partner, and they are doing quite a lot of work in this area of sort of really trying to dig deep into better understanding what transformation can mean in various climate change contexts. And so they had been working with us to try to define what transformational impact means in the terms of the work that the CTCN is conducting. And additionally, based upon that definition and some other criteria that were developed, to do a review of some selected technical assistance cases and also 2 capacity building examples. And so, so we've been working with them to really finalize that, and we've already found some quite interesting outcomes from that work, and they also relate to other areas such as socioeconomic impacts. So it's not just climate change, it's a little bit broader than that, but we hope to be able to share that in greater detail with you, hopefully by the next advisory board meeting.
Thank you very much for that. And now I see a raised hand from Anne, and also I see 2 raised hands from Spencer and Shiv, but I'm not sure if these are new hands or old hands, but maybe Anne and then Spencer and then Shiv. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Moa. And I'll be very short because I was not the first to raise my hand, but I think first I really want to thank Karina for this presentation, as it brings answers to an earlier question I had on the difficulties to leverage funding. And it is really important for us to better understand which can be those challenges and how we can address them. And then I was wondering how the CTCN and the tech want to communicate about these findings, which are really interesting and important. And I think which there would be a great value in making them as broadly known as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then I see a raised hand from Orly. Please, you have the floor.
Yes, hello, thank you very much. Thank you for the very interesting presentation. And you touched on one element that I'm really curious about. It's the transformational impact assessment. So you mentioned that it's going to be presented to us another time, and I'm really looking forward to that. I just wanted to know what stage of the, could you tell me a little bit more about where that product is headed, at what stage it's going to be at once we do hear about it? I do have some specific questions about the definition of transformational assessment, transformational impact, and what went into that definition. So I'd be interested in hearing more about that. And yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Worley. And now there is Merope, you have the floor.
Thank you for this report. And I would like also to thank the CTCN for following up to our discussions, because during the discussions for the reporting towards the EC contract, we had this discussion with Clarine about the impacts of and follow-up of the technical assistance and that are providing under the EC contract. And I made exactly these questions that it is addressed to this survey. And thank CTCN that they have followed up, that they developed in collaboration with the tech this survey. And it would be useful, as Moa made the question, to be incorporated some of the templates of the survey in the monitoring and evaluation framework. I don't know how it is implemented, if there is an e-tool that helps you for this monitoring and evaluation and operationalize this monitoring, but it would be useful to incorporate the template of the survey that you developed here in this e-tool, monitoring and evaluation e-tool. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Merope. And I think I will hand over to Karina to address these questions. But I also see a comment here in the chat from Spencer about what is the linkage with this work and that of the second independent review. How is the results of this incorporated in the review and timeliness for each? So maybe Karina, if you would like to address these questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'll start with Anne's question about communicating the findings. And indeed, we are planning to, we wanted to share them first and foremost with the advisory board, and then we plan to share them more broadly in the coming months in a variety of formats to really get the work out. And we've been also, gathering on some particular other projects that we've done, like the work we've done on the gender just solutions. We did an analysis there as well on some of the impacts over the last 3 years. And so we'd like to take some of these and combine them a bit to share them and communicate them further, both through our own website and certainly in our progress report publication. And then maybe I'll let Rose, I think you wanted to comment on Orly's question regarding the transformational impact, and then I can come back.
Thank you, Oli. You're exactly right. We are advanced. We are in the final draft of this report. But because the Paris Agreement talks about transformation without giving us a definition of what that would mean for purposes of the work we do under the technology framework, so there's a proposal of what that would mean in the context of CTCN, and therefore what we should measure and how we can measure it in order for us to report to you and the COP on how our work has been transformational. But it was very clear to us that we need to first present this to you and get a chance to discuss it, because the definition is going to be very critical. in coming up with this definition, of course, we looked at our theory of change from our M&E, the performance measurement framework that we currently have, but also the indicator guides under that. And then some of the analytical work that came out of our in a survey from the NDEs. But we thought it would be better for us to have like a task force meeting like we did with the Build Back Better to present this to you, especially to get agreement on what we would consider transformational and what would be the appropriate kind of measurement before we move forward. So we are ready. We will work with the chairs to arrange a time for us to present this to you and to get your feedback so that we can incorporate this in our performance measurement framework. We have shared the preliminary analysis out of this with the consultants doing the independent review, but I think it would help us very much to receive your guidance on this so that we can incorporate it, knowing that it captures what you envision as what is transformational based on the work that we do in the CTCN.
And then to Merope's comment, thank you for that. And indeed, the intention is to incorporate the responses from the ND survey into our M&E framework. And I wanted to add that we are also, we've gone through various iterations in the information that we capture from the technical assistance process throughout the years. And now when a technical assistance is completed, we ask the implementing partner to provide a closure report where we list a number of the indicators that we would like to report on and how those should be captured. And we also ask NDEs to provide information. So we are now capturing that at the end of the newer TAs. And as of last year, we started to gather some of the lessons learned that came out of those reports and making those public on the CTCN website. So for a handful of technical assistance cases that have been completed, if you go to the technical assistance summary page, you'll now find additional information on some of the outcomes, but also about the lessons learned and recommendations that have come out of those. And those are at the level of being relevant to the particular technical assistance, but also in terms of broader technology transfer work and the processes that the CTCN uses in its technical assistance. So there's 3 levels of lessons learned that we try to capture, and we'll be increasingly gathering those and making those public as we receive them. And then lastly to Spencer, to your question regarding the how this information is aligned with the independent evaluation, we have provided the full documentation on the NDE survey to those conducting the independent review, so they should have all of that at their disposal for use in their analysis. And indeed, it was, in part as a result of the guidance from the first evaluation that we really started to look at how we could better capture this type of post-implementation information. So we hope that it'll be useful in that process as well.
Thank you very much for these clarifications. And at the moment, I don't see any more raised hands or comments in the chat. So I suggest that we move on to the next agenda item. Back to you, Ping. Thanks.
Thank you, Moa. Let's move to agenda item 19, the NDE and network member presentation. At the task force meeting October 2020, AB members expressed interest in better understanding the CTCN technical assistance process and outputs. We have invited today Ms. Nda Nde Gordon, who is the national designated entity from Jamaica, and Mr. Han Song Yung, director and co-founder of Envelopes, to present technical assistance case studies from the perspective of an NDE and the CTCN network member. Ms. Nda Nde Gordon, welcome, and please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Morning, colleagues. Good afternoon. Good wherever you are. Happy to be here, and thanks for the invitation. Let me see if I can share my screen. If you're seeing it, let me know, please. Yes. So this morning from Jamaica, I'm going to highlight in this presentation the partnership between the CTCN and a number of institutions, the research and technological agenda, which we are developing here under the CAPE program, and I think it is running out of whack. Sorry, let me go back. Let me put a disclaimer here first that this is work that has been developed by my team, led by Omar Alcock, who is responsible for the K program in our unit, and Ajani Aline, who is the Research and Development Officer at the Climate Change Division, serving as the NDE. And while I will present here the work that we did with the CTCN, I must underscore that this is work that has been undertaken under the K program, which is led by the NDC partnership, of which Jamaica is now a co-chair. And this agenda was defined within the total ambit of the CAP. So in terms of an outline, I will present to you this morning really what we consider as a research agenda, or stakeholder engagement processes, what are the linkages with our national climate priorities as outlined both in the NDC, and what are some of the real challenges that we undergo to develop this agenda, and then the next steps as we see it. Under the K program, as you know, the Climate Action Enhancement Program, which is led by the NDC partnership, we defined 11 sub-programs, and these programs are led by 5 international partners. And the CTCN component is a combination of what we call the UNFCCC and the CATA conglomerate to assist us in this development of the climate research agenda. You on the screen here, you will see what the Jamaica CAP program entails. As I said, 11 sub-programs, and they all run in line, and we want to thank the CTCN for jumping in to support us in this regard as we go forward. In the definition of the agenda, we sought to examine ourselves to see what is really what should really constitute a research and technological agenda. And we came up with really 3 simple facts, and this was agreed by the national stakeholders, that a research agenda should be a formal plan of action that summarizes specific issues and ideas in key economic sectors of Jamaica. And these economic sectors were interrogated in full, and you will see a little bit more of how we got there. The second one, it should be a guiding plan. So it should serve as a guide so that decisions can be made. So it should become a decision-making tool, and what should be tackled now in the short, medium, and long term. What should we defer later down as the climate agenda develop. And then this research agenda should be adaptable. So as things change, we should be able to adapt this agenda. So in the context of Jamaica then, having defined that and having agreed on exactly what we require, then we wanted to, what then would we want for this research agenda? And so we agreed on what should be an outcome from the development of this agenda. A very, very clear outcome agreed with CATIA as a consultant to the team. And we agreed that it should be that we identify a multidisciplinary research and technological development agenda that incorporates academia, the research centers that obtains, and the private sector, because we believe that it is in the private sector that transformation will take place, and this should be achieved as we set our climate targets in these key sectors. The relevant policy becomes important, and as you know, Jamaica submitted its updated NDC, so this also becomes important. And the Vision 2030, that is Jamaica National Development Plan. Within that context then, and the outcome that we established, we also define clearly what should be the output from this agenda. And we came up with 5 clear targets, 5 clear outputs. And on the slide, you will notice that we are gradually moving through. We are at output number 3 at this time, where we have completed delivering on output 1. In output number 1, you will, and number 2, you will notice that the academia and research centers, and for academia, we understand that we have, I think, 5 tertiary institutions in Jamaica: the University of the West Indies, the University of the Caribbean, the University of Technology, and all 5 sits on the Climate Change Advisory Board, and also that all 6 were consulted in this regard. In terms of the phases of development, in this slide, you will get an understanding of the products that is being delivered in the varying phases of the work. And here you will notice that we have received the first draft of the agenda from the consultants who I alluded to, was CATIA out of Costa Rica. And the first draft we have received, we have commented on it and have provided the feedback, and the expectation is that we will conclude as of June 30. In this slide, I wanted to, Jamaica has a well-developed stakeholder engagement process, well-defined in a code of conduct out of the parliament. And so we applied that code of conduct, and here you will notice how the stakeholder engagement process, how we prioritize the sectors and the surveys, the bilateral surveys and interviews that were conducted to refine the process and the agenda. The word cloud for us was very, very interesting, because you will notice in doing that and in the consultation, what some of our stakeholders were saying to us that should constitute a research agenda. And you will see coming across research funding, policy, engagement, innovation. These are some of the things that we brought across and allowed us to get into the first draft. In terms of the process, then we ended up out of the prioritizing session from the stakeholders at first with 5 sectors. Based on our original engagement with the CTCN, we had agreed that we would target 3 sectors for the agenda. But having said that, the stakeholders whose voices we listened to came back to us and said, no, this is not acceptable, we need 5. And so we went back again in the dialogue with the CTCN, and we are now targeting 5 sectors as you are seeing there. And these are the priority sectors which you will see embedded in the agenda. So what are the linkages then, having had the first draft with the other sectors and the agenda? What is this agenda and the linkage to the national priority? As I said before, we have the Vision 2030, which is Jamaica's long-term strategy, and the midterm review from the Vision 2030 recognizes the challenges of investment in research and development, and it places emphasis on three things: the health research policy, developing a national research agenda to support national development effort. That was very, very clear in the review, and developing a national research agenda for climate change and to conduct the necessary research to address these strategic values. In the climate change policy framework, which we are reviewing at this time, this is a 2015 policy framework, it identified that there was really limited research capacity and technological development. That was very, very clear gap identified. And in the updated NDC, which was submitted in June, we said in that NDC that we are taking steps to move towards an economy-wide target to bring the emissions into the land use sector and the forest sector and therefore research was identified as a critical step to get us there. And we have a national science, technology, and innovation policy, which was walking to this. And it said to us that science and technology and innovation in Jamaica highlights that there is no established mechanism to measure spend on research and development. So these were very, very clear targets for us to go with. And if we measure and look at the linkages then and tie this to the NDC, since this was part of the updating of the NDC process when we started, the clear linkages to innovation, improving effectiveness and new knowledge came out very, very clearly, which would lead us to the emission reduction targets that we're targeting and the enhanced resilience in terms of our adaptation goals within the NDC. But there were some clear challenges in getting to where we are now as a draft for this agenda. The COVID pandemic, and I don't need to specify there were clear challenges. The face-to-face interactions, which governs a large part of our stakeholder consultation process, was not possible. A lot of it was taken online, and this presented clear challenges. As you know, the private sector, when these are esoteric things, the private sector, the engagement with the private sector, who we believe is a clear target for a research agenda and who we think that should drive the transformation to a low carbon economy, there was severe unresponsiveness from the private sector, and this still presenting some challenges. And in terms of the interviewers, that there were clear linkages, weak linkages on how research impact and influence a policy development process, even though in Jamaica we have clear guidelines as well as to how the policy development process should be conducted and how research should impact those, but there were weak linkages identified. And the lack of financing, which came out over and over again as barriers to enable the implementation of this agenda. And the question keeps coming back: once we develop this agenda, how will we implement it? In a nutshell, that is where we are. And so the next step, as I said, we have the draft agenda. We expect to have it completed at the end of June, when the project will be terminated. We have provided the significant comments from our team to the CTCN and the CATA team. So the revised draft is ongoing, and today actually we have our board meeting where we will have the discussion as well, and then we will have the clear validation of the agenda and the projects identified coming out of that to take care of the financing gap. I will stop there and thank you all very much. And if there are any questions, I will hand back over to you, Don, so that you can move on. Thanks very much. And I thank the CTCN and the team, Romero and the team there for the complete guidance and the partnership in this regard. Thanks again.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon, for your presentation. I now invite Mr. Song Yong-hyun to take the floor.
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me, giving me this opportunity to share my experience in carrying out the CTCN TA in Cambodia. Let me share my screen first. Okay. So let me briefly explain about my experience for carrying out the development of low emission mobility policies and financing proposal for Cambodia. Here is the contents for my presentation for today. In the beginning, let me briefly explain what Envelopes, the company, is doing. Envelopes is a renewable energy project development company. Envelopes is environmental energy developers. So our main business is developing renewable energy projects along with consulting business for climate change and environmental and energy. So this is our team member. We are from different backgrounds and carrying out different experience and carrying out the renewable energy projects development. So we have technical experts in different fields, construction experts, and also environmental, social, gender analysis expert. Our goal, our mission is bring light, bring life, basically trying to provide energy or light to developing countries and also carry on alongside with capacity buildings and also have tried to support, increase the investment to the developing countries. Currently in project development side, we are focusing on agro-photovoltaic technology. And last year, we have been approved by the GCF for funding of a 4 megawatt APB project in Fiji. For our consulting business, including the Cambodia CTCN TA, we have carried out an Ethiopia financing strategy for public transportation TA, and also we are planning to start a new CTCN TA next month in Mozambique for a rainwater collection system. So now I'll explain our execution plan for this Cambodian TA. The project background is basically in Cambodia, the traffic volume has increased because of the economic growth. So in order to meet the quota or meet the goals of their INDC in reducing the GHG impact, GHG emission from the transportation sector, they have decided to implement e-mobility in their government and in the country. So they needed assistance in the TA, utilize the TA program in implementing their new policy, a e-mobility policy and a financing plan utilizing a green climate funds. So that was our two main goals of this project. As you can see, Envelopes under cooperation of various experts and with the Cambodia local stakeholders and Korean NDE, the Ministry of Science and ICT, and the Green Technology Center, the project was carried out. So our strategy for this project was, first of all, basically to identify the current situation of Cambodia. We had to perform a literature review and a local survey of current traffic condition, GHG emission station status, and transportation policies and road traffic regulations and conditions. After collecting because of the COVID-19 situation, we had to utilize local experts to collect the data and serve as a communication channel with the local stakeholders. Second strategy was basically in collaborating with the different experts, field of environmental and social aspect, and also the technology aspect. Third was policy making based on Cambodia's current needs, with the close discussion with the Cambodian stakeholders. We wanted to provide a actual policy action plan that can be implemented and applied directly for the implementation of e-mobility. Also, this was very limited. There was a lot of limit due to the COVID-19 because of hard to actually open a workshop with the people gathering in one place also, and limiting us to visit Cambodia physically. And last strategy was for the preparation of the funding proposal, utilizing Envelopes' experience for actually getting approved by the GCF the funding proposal previously, and then preparing the concept note and based on that experience, and also teaming up with a e-mobility partner in Korea to have actual feedback, market feedback, in order to develop a business model in accordance with the concept note. So the actual deliverables that we have prepared for the project was, first of all, as you can see, the picture shows the first and last inception workshop that was physically held in Cambodia. In February, we were lucky enough to actually visit Cambodia for the first time to actually introduce the CTCN project, meet the local stakeholders, and collect their ideas and experience from their previous projects. And the next step was literature review on current policy and plans. So as I mentioned before, due to COVID-19 situation, excluding the first inception workshop, Envelopes and our team members were unable to visit Cambodia in person. So at most, we had to utilize the local consultant that working with us to actually collect all the data within Cambodia. And another problem was a lot of the information was in the Khmer language. So there was one of the difficulties that we have faced, but we have gathered enough information from each of the government stakeholders and the market research to actually carry out the analysis and the reviews that was basis of our policy action plan and the GCF concept note. So based on those, we have finally prepared the policy action for development of low emission mobility policies and submitted to the NDA in November 2020. And I'll share the details later on in the continuing slide. So what we first did, what the analysis was based on our assumption, we made a BAU scenario for 2050 for GHG emission. It shows that the trend shows that it will increase with the number of vehicles registered also be getting increased, and which will affect also people's health. So based on the BAU scenarios, we had to have a alternative scenario to reduce the GHG emission. All the alternative scenarios was in the assumption of that the e-vehicles or the e-mobility system is utilizing the renewable energy for their energy sources, which will maximize the reduction of the GHG emissions. So first alternative scenario that we have decided to implement was implementing the e-motorcycle, which accounts for the motorcycle accounts for the highest percentage of Cambodia's registered vehicles. And with the life cycle cost analysis, it shows that it's the most effective and realistic scenario. And by implementing the e-motorcycle, the GHG emission can be reduced by 18.4%. The next alternative scenario was implementing e-cars and e-buses. Just looking at the GH emission standards itself, standalone, e-cars and e-buses generate the most amount of GHG emissions. So by replacing those two modalities, it can be, the GHG emission can be reduced by 30%. Also, we had a close analysis regarding the environmental health, social and gender impacts, and we carried out on the strategical analysis. Other previous studies and previous work didn't really account for the ESIA factors. So for the environmental factors, the major problem was the batteries, basically, because usually e-mobility is a very clean technology. It didn't really generate any major environmental and health issues utilizing that technology. But with the growing pollution concerns regarding the reuse batteries, and also in making the batteries, the environmental issues was a problem. Also, for social gender impacts, e-motorbikes is a very affordable and accessible low-income group method of transportation, and also it heavily a lot of use by females in Cambodia. So it can also have, by utilizing and the alternative scenario number one and implementing e-motorbikes, can have impact on poverty reduction and gender employment impacts. Also, the rural area and rural electrification should be considered to be for the alternative to be implemented over all around Cambodia. And socioeconomic and environmental and gender analysis shows that for environmental mitigation measures and social mitigation measures, all policy and institutional enabled conditions should follow, such as all the pricing affordability, providing subsidies, and having institutional energy policies that to be accounted for the implementation of e-mobility in Cambodia. So based on those analysis and data that we have collected, rather than having a set policies to be provided to the Cambodian government, we identified major gaps, 6 gaps total, in the current situation and implementation of the e-mobility. So we categorized the barriers and provided action areas and action type that should be reviewed and implemented in order to successfully incorporate e-mobility to Cambodia. So our concept was basically utilize this chart right down here, the tables, and it can be a standalone document which will assist the policymakers to review and implement their e-mobility policies as in the future. Based on also the project that we have prepared for the concept note was a low emission financing and incentive program in major cities of Cambodia. At the current situation, realistically, to have a business model right after utilizing the GCF fund, we identified the best way currently is focusing on 2 main cities, Phnom Penh and Siem Reap, and having that a e-bike microfinancing system to be implemented to decrease the interest rate of purchasing of e-bikes than compared to the conventional type, and encourage the Cambodian people to switch to e-bike rather than keep purchasing the conventional bikes. Also, the grant can provide incentive money and support program to encourage the Cambodian people. The second component, technical assistance, shows that currently the Cambodian people are not really aware of the benefits of using e-bikes in climate change and also various factors. Cambodian people likes a conventional motorcycle because of the design and the maintenance issue. So we would like to have a TA program built in this concept to raise awareness of e-mobility and also raise the technical and policy capacity of the policymakers in Cambodia. Finally, some recommendation and limitation that we faced during the actual carrying out the project was obviously everybody agrees and have actually faced the challenges of the COVID-19 situation. So I think I don't have to explain that anymore. A second issue was of thinking about idealistic situation and realistic situation in deciding which way to actually implement the e-mobility situation. For example, as I mentioned before, for e-mobility, in a more ideal situation, the better solution can be in a bigger scale, like for implementing a public transportation system, which can help the people of that developing country a lot more and also have a better impact in GHG emission. But in the realistic side, the issue was deciding on the e-bike system while we are preparing the concept note, which can be immediately show the impact changes of the GHG emission and have a initial stage of introducing e-mobility to the people of Cambodia. So what we did was on the policy action plan also, we actually recommended some further studies that can be carried out to assist in Cambodia's implementation of e-mobility. One was research for recycling the used batteries, e-mobility batteries in different ways. And there has been a lot of research been starting in Korea and all around the world regarding these issues. And also differentiating the rural electrification situation and the urban electrification situation, and having that two different scenarios implemented while implementing the e-mobility system to Cambodia. So that was one of the further studies that we have recommended. And that concludes my presentation. If you have any question, I'm happy to answer those. So I'll pass on the floor to the, yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Han, and also thanks to Madam Gordon for both of your presentation. It's very informative. And I see questions from the chatting room from Anne, which is, which type of financing mechanisms were recommended to Cambodia to ensure the accessibility of such e-motorcycles for women? Have these further studies been included in the GCF concept note? I think this question is to Mr. Han.
In the concept note specifically, we didn't focus yet on the accessibility of e-motorcycle for women yet, because in the current situation, as this is a concept note, we more focus on the general public of the Cambodia. Currently, they are not really, as I mentioned before, they're not really know the importance of e-mobility itself. So I think that's that's a point that I can actually follow up in after continuing the concept note and developing at the funding proposal stage. So I'll take that in mind and have another development with our team. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Han. I see a question from Arlie. Arlie, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I wanted to, first of all, thank both presenters for very, very interesting presentations. I really appreciated being taken through in detail the work that's being done. I have a question in particular. Well, there are more comments in particular related to the presentation on the Jamaica TA. I noticed that one of the key challenges was private sector engagement. I'm assuming that means engagement of domestic private sector. And I guess my comment would be it would be interesting to know if the CTCN has ideas about how they could help with lack of responsiveness in that respect. and whether there is a role for the CTCN in ensuring greater responsiveness from the private sector. The other item I noticed that jumped out at me is the lack of influence of research on policy development. Again, there might not be time to address this today, but it would be interesting to know if there are recommendations on how to deal with that, because I see that as a significant linkage that's missing, or that's a significant challenge. And finally, with respect to lack of financing and how to implement the work, I see this as an emerging area for the CTCN to do some work in, and I know the CTCN is looking at doing some more on addressing financing and enabling financing. So I just wanted to raise that point, that it's interesting to hear directly about the challenges with that, and look forward to hearing more in the future about how the CTCN might engage on that particular issue. Thank you very much to both presenters.
Thank you, Orly. I also see raised hand from Matthew Kennedy. So Matt, you can have the floor, and we can ask the presenter to take both of your questions. Matt, you have the floor. It seems Matt have some difficulties in using the question to speak. So Matt, you can type your question in the chat, so I will repeat. So in the meantime,
sorry, Mr. Chair, Clarine has resolved it. My apologies. I was just in a different Zoom, it seems. I couldn't ask a question. I just wanted to really focus on behalf of the Ringos on the very good presentation from Jamaica. Orly has taken a little bit of my fire in terms of the influence of research and policymakers, but I would like to just highlight a couple of points. And I have to say that the presentation was excellent in terms of understanding that it isn't for research's sake, in terms of just for academia. There's a tendency for people to think that research is just done by academia and it lands on a shelf. But it was really great to see the link between the researchers and business, and the link between business and also the policy making side. And it is a very difficult thing to track the contribution that research would play in terms of informing policy. I think it's something that time helps in terms of the research environment is often ahead of the policy environment, and it takes a little time for the policy makers to take on board the evidence to inform policy. So over a longer time horizon, we may see the impact of research in terms of informing policy, and actually have that more policy-oriented research. But I just wanted to recognize the very strong presentation, and it's good to hear the interaction between the business, the research community, and policymaking in Jamaica. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Madam Gordon, could you answer the questions, please?
Thank you. It seems I'm having challenges this morning. I'm happy I was able to make the presentation, joining you now from my phone. But notwithstanding, let me make 2 points, and thank you all for the reaction to the presentation. In terms of the private sector, and I think that's the one that gives us the most concern. But we are doing some work now with the private sector. As I said, we believe that it is within the private sector that the transformation will take place, parallel to this work, we were doing some work looking at barriers to private sector engagement in climate action. And we have an elaborate scoping study that we did last year, just before the pandemic hit. And in terms of engaging the private sector, the financial institutions, the MSME sector, and hope that this is something that we, over time, that they will become more engaged and they will see the value of the research that we are taking place. Because if the private sector is involved in the research and technological agenda, then the deployment will become a little bit easier. And so this is the track that we are taking. As opposed to the link with academia, and so I think we have a climate change advisory board, and all the tertiary institutions in Jamaica sits on that board, and that board advises the minister at the level of policy. But that board also involves it's a multi-stakeholder board. It is the only department that has a board within government, and really a very unique situation. It involves private sector, it involves the youth, it involves the civil society organization. And this is the board that we are using almost as a guide to track the implementation of this technical assistance. So when we started with the CTCN and the consultants, one of the first things that we did when we had the draft in those early days was for the consultant to make this presentation to this multi-stakeholder board and to get some feedback so that we can have somewhere along the line, down the road, an impact on policy. So many different approaches to fill the gap that we identify ourselves as some of the challenges which will prevent deployment once we get there. But there is hope that this will become a national research agenda that will be implemented right across the board, and it will be inscribed in the Vision 2030 medium-term framework. I hope I've answered some of the questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon. I think the question also goes to Mr. Han. Mr. Han?
Yes, yes.
Please, you have the floor.
Can you repeat the question one more time? I was
I think the question was from Orly, right? Orly, could you repeat your question?
Sorry, it wasn't actually specific to the Cambodia TA question. I think in that presentation, financing as well was touched on, but there was I didn't have a specific question for the Cambodian TA.
Okay, thank you, my mistake. Actually, I have one question to Mr. Han regarding your presentation. Is very informative, and my question is, so after your team have the deliverables ready to the local government, so how are they given their feedback? And can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yes, for the policy action plan, we had an online workshop with the government stakeholders in order to present and explain why we took the approach, and they have raised some questions, and we adjusted the actual policy action plan in accordance to their comments, and they accepted, and we are in the process of discussing how they will utilize the actual policy action plan. And for the concept note, currently we have submitted the actual final concept note, and currently we are in the stage of discussion with our potential accredited entities regarding to process the concept note and then move on to the next stage of funding proposal. So I think we are, even though the TA itself has been finalized, we are in the process of discussion in continuing the actual project itself.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Han, and also thanks to Madam Gordon. I think we need to move to our next agenda item. So if there's further questions regarding the previous presentations, you may send the question later to the secretary, and I think the secretary will have to extend the question to the speakers and have to answer. And as mentioned by Moa in the beginning of today's meeting, we will have a added item before agenda item 20, other matters. We will have the adoption of the financial statement based on the new development. So I will first request the secretary to give us a very brief updates on the situation.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, please, Amanda.
Thank you very much. So good afternoon. With reference to the query yesterday from Mr. Kenichi Wadu on the validity of the available balances against the contribution from the Ministry of Environment Japan, I would like to confirm that the Ministry of Environment Japan and Mr. Kenichi Wadu have accepted our clarification and revision. Figure 4 in document number AB 2021-17 15.1 has been revised and circulated this morning. Please note that all the other information, including the final financial statement, the financial report by service area, and the fund balance at the end of 2020, which I presented yesterday, remain the same. In figure 4 of the presentation, we have made a visual amendment to the funds available at the end of 2020 to reflect the individual validity end dates for the grants under the Ministry of Environment of Japan. We therefore look forward to the board kindly endorsing the financial reports for 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda, for this very clear updates. I see raised hand from Kenichi. Kenichi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the clarification and revision. Now I endorse the update, the 2020 financial statement. Thanks.
Many thanks.
Thank you, Kenichi. So if there's no other comments or reservations, we will adopt the financial statement. I say no, raise your hand. So we adopt the financial statement. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you very much.
And then we move to our next agenda item. Moa, please, the chair is yours. Moa? Moa, are you there? It seems Moa is having difficulties speaking.
I think Moa has the mute micro.
Moa, please unmute. Hello, I can hear you, but the voice is very small. Hello? Yeah, I can hear, but it's very small voice. Okay, the secretary, would you please help to resolve this technical issue? In the meantime, I can I continue sharing this agenda item if you agree?
Please go ahead, Ping.
Okay, okay. So we are now having time for any other business. So please indicate if you would like to speak. And I understand we have received a request from a few of the UNFCCC constituency groups to speak. Please go ahead and kindly tell us your name and which group you are representing today. But please just make sure the remark and intervention need to be short and concise. Okay, I see the WGC, IPO, and Yango. I understand you will deliver the intervention together, right?
Yes.
Okay, Cassie, please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Ping, for the floor. And I am Kathy, representing WGC, and we'll be making this intervention on behalf of 3 UNFCCC constituencies: Yango, the youth constituency; WGC, the women and gender constituency; and IPO, the indigenous peoples organizations. And first, we would like to express our gratitude to the chairs and all CTCN AB members for the opportunity to be involved as observers and to provide our intervention. And we are continuously committed to supporting the acceleration of technology development, transfer, and implementation. Our 3 constituencies are highly concerned with the evolution of the climate crisis as foreseen to be shown by the 6th IPCC report. And therefore, climate ambition must be accelerated across the whole society and across all sectors. This is vital for the future of humanity, and we need both stronger climate policies, financial incentives, but also further development and wider spread of climate technologies. And climate technologies are not only a vital part of the solution to the climate crisis, there are risks involved in implementation as well. And to reduce the risks sometimes linked to climate technologies and to make the implementation more democratic and socially just, women, young people, and indigenous people need to be involved, from the development up to the implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. And this is also what drives us to engage further in that UNFCCC technology mechanism. And we would like to also like to inform the AB of recent achievements linked to our collaboration with the CTCN. For WGC, the 16 Gender Just Climate Solutions Award winners, as highlighted by Ms. Rose Mabaza and Ms. Karina Larson on Monday and yesterday, have raised their competencies and understanding of the UNFCCC technology and financial mechanisms, especially last week, as they all participated in a week-long online training organized by WECF with a strong contribution of CTCN staff for the Africa, APAC, and LAC regions. And the training's key elements have been shared with over 60 nominees of these awards via webinars. And 3 award winners have submitted technical assistance requests to the CTCN or applied to the IFCIA in the last 6 months. And 1 fast-track assistance request on solar grinding technologies for women-led MSMBs, micro, small, and medium businesses, has been submitted by the NDE, validated by CTCN, and just started in Senegal. And 1 award winner has joined the CTC network as a knowledge partner and is providing mentorship services to entrepreneurs with the guidance of CTCN. As for Yango, during the COP25, Yango organized an event together with the CTCN and have also presented examples of youth involvement in climate technologies at the Seed Stars Climate Innovations Lab last December. And we have also developed an incoming position for a junior consultant at the CTCN. We are very thankful for this collaboration so that we can contribute with our knowledge and experience to the development and transfer of climate technologies. And furthermore, on behalf of Yango, WGC, and IPO, we would like to thank you for having acknowledged our willingness to join the CTCN Advisory Board as members and for including it in the agenda of COP26. And we have also informed both Chile and the UK's COP presidencies regarding this. We know that the revision of AB's composition is likely to be included, but want to ensure that the inclusion of our 3 constituencies as members of the board is part of that agenda item as well. And since it's a party-driven process, we'd like to ask you from the country delegations to confirm that our request will be part of the agenda and will be brought up in the negotiations. And therefore, we'd like to ask you, the CTCN Advisory Board members and chairs, if you are informed of how the revision of CTCN AB's composition will be addressed at COP26 and under which agenda item, as this revision is due to take place this year. And we look forward to hearing from you either now or if you prefer to reach out to us separately with this information. And we thank you again for this opportunity to collaborate and intervene today to share our views and requests for prompt and responsible representation of youth, women, and people from Indigenous communities. Thank you very much on behalf of Youngo, WGC, and IPO. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassie, for your intervention on behalf of Youngo, WGC, and IPO. And also thanks to your constituency and your participation in the work of CTCN, and looking forward in the future for such participation and contribution to be continued. And I think the comments you just mentioned will be reflected in the meeting minutes, but your request of the agenda item of COP26, I'm just speaking on myself. I'm not the person who is setting the agenda, so I'm not sure what will be in the agenda of COP26. And in the meantime, I will open the floor to any AB members who would like to speak at the moment. I see from the chatting room, from Anne, who is supporting your intervention, Cassie. And
thank you.
I see no raised hand. Then we will go to our next agenda item, which is agenda item 21, Advisory Board Administrative Matters, including the election of new chairs, new chair and vice chair. As per the COP decisions related to the election of the chair and vice chair of the CTCN Advisory Board, the Advisory Board shall elect annually a chair and a vice chair from among its government members for a term of 1 year each. In practice, only a vice chair needs to be elected annually, since the current vice chair shall be elected as the new chair after the current chair completes his term. At the end of 17th Advisory Board meeting, the 1 year term of the new chair and new vice chair shall start. The position of the chair is currently occupied by myself. Ms. Moa Foster from Sweden, who has served as vice chair, shall begin her term as chair at the end of this meeting and until the end of the 19th meeting in 2022. So congratulations, Moa, for being elected as chair of CTCN AB. And the Advisory Board should now elect a new vice chair from the non-Annex 1 constituency. The new vice chair shall commence the term at the end of the 17th Advisory Board meeting. The election of a vice chair shall take into consideration the members' remaining term in office, as well as the members' eligibility for re-election. As such, I would like to call on AB members for nominations of a vice chair. And I will also give a brief report here. After extensive consultation among Annex members, we have the candidacy who is Omidi Moses Jura of Kenya. And if there's any comments or if there's any objections, you may raise your hand now. Okay, it seems I just experienced a connection issue. So I'm wondering if you heard what I said. Okay. So
Hello.
after extensive consultation among the non-Annex 1 AB members, we in agreement that the vice chair elected will be Omidi Moses from Kenya. So if there's any objections, you may raise your hand. So if no, I think we will have our new chair and vice chair to give us some words here. Moa?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, perfect.
Loud and clear.
Yes, oh, perfect. Sorry, I had some technical problems here on my end. So I would just like to say thank you, everyone, and I'm honored to continue as a co-chair for CTCN together with Omedi, and looking forward to continue our good collaboration in the advisory board. And this upcoming year is a very important year for climate action and for implementing the Paris Agreement. And I would also like to thank Ping for your excellent and dedicated work as chair for CTCN. It has been a very good collaboration, and I think I speak on behalf of all of us that we have really appreciated your leadership during this challenging year. You have been very effective in moderating the virtual meetings, which is not an easy task. And you have been transparent and listening to all AB members and observers and taking on board different views. And you have contributed to progress in many areas and to the continued success of the CTCN. So thank you very much, Ping, and also looking forward to our continued collaboration in the AB. Thank you again, and over to Omedi.
Hello. I want to kindly request you to let me switch off my camera because I've had lots of challenges. I didn't hear the last bit of things that was happening, and I think it's because probably of the camera. So, distinguished participants attending the 17th AB meeting, members of the Secretariat, fellow colleagues of the Advisory Board, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to thank you all for considering me worthy to serve among you and together with you in the capacity of the Vice Chair of the AB. It's a very humbling experience. Well, for those who may not be knowing me, my name is Omedi Moses Jura. I'm a Kenyan and a negotiator for Kenya and for Africa on technology. I was a member of the TEC during the formation of the CTCN, where the TEC was very instrumental. And I have seen the CTCN grow all along. I think there are members here who know about this, who are also members of the TEC by then. I know Matt was one of us at that time, and I'm happy to see him around as a friend as well. I sincerely thank all previous AB members, including chairs and vice chairs, for bringing CTCN to where it is today. I must say that special thanks go to you, Ping, the chair, the current chair, or the chair who is outgoing, for your encouragement and for your good work as well. You've been very, very consistent to our working together with more, and I appreciate that so much. It is unfortunate that it's a difficult time for all of us, and that colleagues from developing countries are not able to link up well, more so the LDCs who need services of the CTCN most. And even in this meeting, we are missing an LDC representative, I can see. And we have to accept it. It's difficult, but we have to see how to help one another and to help them as well. Yeah, it has been very challenging in the last 3 meetings, which have been virtual, but good enough. At least some of us have been able to somehow follow. Thank you for your patience. Thanks to the Secretariat for the hard work and for the enabling environment with that situation. It is my strong belief that together, we shall not only take the CTCN to the next level, but also, more importantly, make use of it to assist developing countries, contribute meaningfully in saving the planet, which is actually doomed, while at the same time developing in a sustainable manner, then they themselves, knowing that they are coming up and need to develop and be like the rest. But it is also evident that the demand for CTN services is growing, and very soon it might overwhelm us, given that every country has a responsibility in the new agreement. And just as an example, for us in Kenya, I'm currently in the National Task Force responsible for the formation and implementation of the 5-year National Climate Change Action Plan, which has now been formed. And in Kenya, we have a Climate Change Act that came up in 2016 and a Climate Change Framework Policy. So when we are talking about climate change and implementing the action plan, it is a requirement by law. And we have to show that we have done this, and there is a process for doing that. So our demand for CTCN services in Kenya as my country is already very high. Recently, we even put up another request, and with the implementation of the NDCs, I can see it coming up a lot more. To be brief, and just to give an example from my side. To my chair, Moa, I'm in your able hands. I'm ready to learn, and I'm also ready to follow your instructions closely. Please go ahead and instruct me accordingly. Yes, as we work together. And I am very humbled to see all your congratulations right now. Thank you very much, colleagues. And best wishes to our colleagues. With your support, I may work successfully. And I really request for your support, members and colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you both, Moa and Omidi. Let's move to our next agenda item, the date and venue of the next meeting. So the last one on the agenda. And as the COP26 meeting is expected to take place in November this year, we will revert back to the usual schedule for the fall AB meeting, as it's difficult at this time to envision an in-person meeting. We would like to suggest organizing the next advisory board meeting as a virtual meeting in September, following the tech meeting, which is expected to take place between the 7th and the 10th September 2021. So the floor is open for any board member who wish to comment on the selection of the date and venue. The floor is open.
I'm so sorry, dear Chair. Ping, my sound was cut just as you pronounced the date. Could you repeat? I'm so sorry. Thank you.
The date is between 7th and 10th September 2021, which is just following the tech meeting.
Good. Thank you very much.
So we understand there is still a lot of uncertainty and this special challenging time of COVID-19. So a lot of arrangement is not ideal arrangement, but that's, we think is feasible arrangement at the current stage. I see raised hand from Omidi. Please, the floor is yours.
It's a question and a follow-up. I've seen Chief has asked the same question. Will we be having a joint session with the tech? Because my preference this time would be that we have, if possible, in-person meeting, looking at the challenges that we have with virtual meetings and the fact that we will be polishing up for the COP. It would require some very good organization so that we have members all together and make it easier to sail through with our agenda. Yeah, if they can all come and we hold the meeting in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Omidi, for your comment. The Secretary, please correct me if I'm wrong. So the 7th to 10th September is the planned time for the tech meeting, right? So the CTCN meeting will happen a week after this dates, right? That's my understanding. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Ping, the dates that we have confirmed from the tech are the 6th through the 10th of September. And we have not formally explored with the tech whether we'll have a joint session again for the fall meeting, but we certainly can undertake a discussion with them on that, and then see what is possible.
Just to add that because there might be consideration for us to receive the NDC report that we're doing jointly together, as well as final independent review. We'll be happy to follow up with our colleagues in the Secretariat and the TEC with the guidance of the chairs on the possibility of a joint session in the fall.
Thank you, Karina, and also Rose for the clarification. Any more questions or comments? Okay, I think this plan is just tentative. It's just tentative. So I think the secretary will keep very close track of the situation, and we'll try, I think, the best to have in-person meeting if the situation allows in the fall. So I suggest we tentatively have a planned date for the meeting, and then as the COVID-19 develops, and the secretary will have new plans and agreed by all AB members, I think later by email and other form. Will that be acceptable? I see nodding. Omedi, I see your hands raised, please.
Yes, very kindly allow me to also state that I was privileged to meet the COP president, the Right Honorable Alok Sharma, when he visited Kenya recently, and he was very concerned about the success of the COP, and we had discussions together with two other negotiators from Kenya, and it was very important. It came out important that in-person meeting just before the COP would be very useful, not only for the various agenda items that may appear difficult or might bring problems during the COP, but also I think for us that would be something to work on, and if we can, then we will avoid a lot of inconvenience. So I agree with you that this should be tentative, and I suppose that the tech can also be flexible enough, and we also AB members be flexible enough not to have a fixed date, so that if there will be need to make any adjustments, we can do so. That would be my humble request. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Omedi, for the additional comments and clarification. So I think the issue right now is not on the timing. It's about it's a virtual meeting or a in-person meeting. So I think it's easier if we have the tentative dates agreed in this meeting, and then as the situation develops, the secretary will keep very close evaluation of the situation and then come up with the best option of the meeting. So would that be acceptable? If that's the case, we will have the week after the TEC have their next meeting. Secretary, would that be right? So normally we will have 3 days from Monday to Wednesday. That's 13th to 15th of September. Secretary, please correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct, Ping.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Rose. So we tentatively agree our next AB meeting, the CTCN AB 18, is tentatively planned to be held in 13th to 15th September 2021. Okay, thank you, colleagues. Let's move to the last agenda item. Moa, please.
Thank you very much. And before closing the meeting for today, I would like to give the floor to Rose for some final words. So Rose, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Moa, for the opportunity. Ordinarily, you should be closing the meeting, but I just wanted to take this time on behalf of my colleagues at the Secretariat, the entire team, to thank Mr. Ping for the wonderful support and collaboration we've received in guidance during his tenure as co-chair for the CTCN. We've all been talking about how 2020 was a really challenging year, and yet we were able, through your guidance, to have two full, successful and productive ABs, several intersessional working groups that were really productive for the work we do, network engagement, resource mobilization, and knowledge work that we are doing, especially to support our M&E. So I just wanted to say that thank you so much. We've really appreciated your gentle arm of guidance. You may not be chair anymore, but we're still looking forward to working with you and your continued guidance during the AB. So on behalf of my colleagues at the Secretariat, we just wanted to say thank you very much. We really appreciated your guidance and leadership.
Thank you very much for that, Rose. Thank you everyone for participating in the 17th Advisory Board meeting, and we will hereby close this meeting. Thank you all for very good discussions, and we would also like to remind that participants' comments and questions will be reflected in the minutes of this meeting. So thank you everyone again, and goodbye.
Bye-bye,
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.